Hi guys, welcome back to Our Life. Before I actually get into the gameplay of And Then Summer Ended, I wanted to just tell you about my thought process for the games that I'm playing because I think my upload schedule is going to change, not that anybody cares at all, but I want it to be out there so people understand if they have any interest in why I do what I do. So I've been recording all of my games in bulk, which I'm still continuing to do because it's the easiest way for me to do this right now, but I've been recording each of the games all at once, every single game, and forcing myself to play every single game and upload them one by one in order. So currently that's 3 different games and I just upload all of those all the time, and that's not how I want to record anymore. I want to record whichever game I'm having the most fun with. So I am currently really excited to finish doing Our Life, so I think I'm going to continue doing that. Of course you're going to hear from the other games. Sally Face is not gone, Danganronpa's not gone, but I do just want to play the games that I enjoy, and then I will enjoy the other ones at a different time. So while you might see more Our Life now, you might see more Sally Face later when I get really into the story, or you might see more Danganronpa when I figure out how to fix every technical problem I have when I play that game. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on where my headspace is for playing video games and if you care at all. So alright. So let's just jump into it. And Then Summer Ended. I'm ready to move on. There was no denying it. Today was the very last day of summer. Tomorrow you were heading to class. I'm probably anxious. Going back to school meant handing over the autonomy you'd had over the past weeks. You had very little control over what you did at school or who you shared a class with. It was with heavy heart that you chose your outfit for your final day of freedom. Life was going to be different. You had come to think of summer vacation as the norm, but school sucked up the majority of the year, whereas the summer vacation was just a respite in the middle. So rather than it being different, it was kind of a return to the normal? What did your normal life really mean? You considered how fondly your moms talked about their summer vacations as kids. You dimly recognized that one year the pattern of high school and summer itself would be over for good. It was hard to imagine. You'd gotten distracted, one arm still out of a sleeve. You pulled it through and put your mind back to the present. This season had brought about plenty of changes of its own, like Kira's visit, though that too is coming to an end today. I'm glad I got to know her. She was interesting to be around. You liked how easy it was to talk to her. You finished dressing, which was good. Cove would be there any moment. You'd agreed to see his mom off together. Officially, the plan was that he would come over to bring you around to his house when she was ready to be set off, but you both knew that you'd be hanging out for at least a little while beforehand. Kira's visit had troubled Cove when it first happened. It had been a sudden change, thanks to Mr. Holden's infamous tendency to surprise people, but once he was able to adjust, he'd been in pretty good spirits with her around. It was a relief for everyone. You turned to your desk, where the box containing your accessories resided. I definitely have an anklet. Your eyes bored into the box. Should you wear it for Cove's visit today? Yeah. Your heart pounded as you slipped the hoop through the clasp and fastened it in place. Would Cove spot it? Your face grew hot as you imagined how he'd react. The next thought that crossed your mind was, I'll go downstairs. You strolled down the stairs. Someone else might have been able to answer it, but he was your guest. It was only a few minutes later when the doorbell rang. As you'd chosen to stand beside it to wait for Cove, there was no delay in pulling it open. Cove was there, just as you had expected. Seeing you, he flashed you a bright grin.
Hey.
Hi, Jamie. Took you long enough. You only live across the street. You stuck your tongue out at him as you ushered him inside, then bustled him up the stairs. Back up in your room, you sat down on your bed and waited for Cove to settle in, as you knew he would. With other guests, you might have offered them a seat, but you and Cove were long past those tentative stages of friendship. Your room was similar to him as his own. You watched as Cove sat down in your desk chair, his preferred spot. He rolled it closer to the bed to make it easier to chat, tweaked the angle so that he was facing you fully. Once happy with the position, he leaned in towards you, hands held in his lap. His actions weren't the ones of someone who planned on moving from his spot anytime soon, even though you had an appointment to keep together that day. When is your mom leaving?
Don't worry about it.
We've got some time. She's still got a shower and stuff before she goes. She didn't want me to just keep hanging around while she was doing that. He lifted his head, his gaze drifting out through the window, and chuckled. I can't believe she's already leaving, just when I'm getting used to her being there every day. He leaned back in the chair, a wry smile tickling his cheeks. Yeah. He shook his head as if shaking off the topic like a dog whipping off water following a dip in the sea. Cove looked back at you, lips parted as if he was about to speak, but instead his eyes widened and his mouth closed into a tiny frown. Something has caught his attention. I think it's the anklet. Something wrapped around where the end of your leg met your foot. He cast his eyes back up to your face, then down to your ankle, and back to your face. He repeated this process once, twice more, as if struggling to hold the two items in tandem. Maybe he was weighing up whether this could be a coincidence or not. Or maybe he was just too shy to verbalize his thoughts, or was still trying to find the words, and this was the most he could manage. The intention made you feel... amused, probably. It was hard not to laugh at Cove's scrambled response. You stifled your laughter with a hand clasped firmly around your mouth. Even so, you could feel the way the smile had lifted your face. On his next glance back to your face, Cove saw your expression had shifted. You watched as his bewilderment eroded into mortification as he realized that he'd been caught staring. He quickly spun in the chair to face the wall instead, allowing you to glimpse the flesh that had spread all the way to his ears. He twisted in his seat, wringing his hands and determinedly avoiding looking in your direction again. It seems that he decided against saying anything at all. What's the problem, Cove? Cove mumbled something unintelligible as his slumped over. With how he was hunched over, the quiet words had no chance of reaching you. You weren't going to get anything out of him in this state. You waited for him to come around before speaking again. Finally, he piped up, very softly. Did you do that because of what I said before? I mean, you know. The last few words were whispered as though they were a precious secret. The ankle bracelet? Yes. His eyes squeezed shut. You had no idea if the answer made him feel better or more nervous. He eventually looked down at his lap where his fingers were flexing and curling in an awkward dance of nerves. His chest rose as he breathed deep. Well, it looks good on you. Your heart skittered in your chest like a stone skipping across water, one big leap from the unexpected compliment, followed by a series of shorter ones as you absorbed the words. You beamed at him. He was looking at you again at last, and returned the smile shyly. This really couldn't have worked out better, you thought. There was nothing else he could add after that. The conversation lapsed into another comfortable lull. Cove swung his feet underneath the seat of the chair, eyes resting on you. Having him here was so nice. No matter how you spent the time, you always felt better for being in his company. You couldn't help but adore him, both as a friend and in a way that plucked at your heart, a vague yearning for more. Maybe it was because summer was almost over that your feelings were rushing in on you now, like high tide at the end of a long day. Summer was such a meaningful time for the two of you. Not only because it was when you first met, but because it was a season that you could spend almost entirely as you pleased, and you both chose to spend it together. Oh, I want to tell him. Now was the time. You couldn't go another day without expressing these feelings you had. Oh my gosh, you're about to go into like high school, right? We have to tell him. I'll just tell him. It was best to be direct with Cove. You didn't want to leave room for ambiguity or misunderstanding at such an important moment. Cove was your friend. You had always been friends. It meant a lot to you, but you knew deep down that wasn't really all he was. Not anymore. You had to let him know. So excited? You looked directly at him. Cove. He had already been watching you, but he lifted his head attentively at the call. Your cheeks were as hot as if you were standing in the midday sun. Cove raised an eyebrow. Your heart raced. The sound rang in your ears, shutting out everything else. I have a crush on you. Cove froze in his seat, the only motion coming from his widening eyes. With a jolt, you realized that was literally the only thing he was doing. He hadn't taken a single breath since you uttered the words. Did I take your breath away? While it was a good quip, Cove didn't react immediately. You began to worry about him passing out. That would be awkward to explain to everyone. I'd like to give it back. Breathe? Cove still had no response. You were starting to clamber off the bed towards him when finally he sucked in a deep breath. Okay. His voice cracked on the second syllable, the words at odds with his nervous appearance. His eyes were darting around, unsure of where to place them. I don't know what to do now. You could tell me how you feel? I really want to know. Cove tensed, his breathing short and quick. His hands were gripping his knees tightly like a bird's claws around a branch in a gale, desperately clinging on to safety and stability. Yeah, thank you for that before. You couldn't help but crack a slight smile at his sudden formalness. He couldn't tell it was ridiculous too. Sorry for being weird, it's just, I kind of thought, or hoped, that sometimes something like this might happen, with us talking about liking each other. You did? You were thinking about it before? He nodded ever so slightly. Your face felt a lot hotter after that. Cove brightened a little at your positive reaction, and his explanation continued. well, could sort of picture how it might go, what it'd be like with you and me. But just the first part. I could never imagine anything that'd come after. And now that it's actually happened, we're there. He took another deep breath, stuttering on the exhale. This makes things different. Should we find a crystal ball for answers? I don't think we'd see anything. So you have no faith in us? That isn't what I meant. It's just, they can't really show the future. They're just glass. You were happy to see him being livelier. His breathing started to level out once again, slowing to a usual steady rhythm. He closed his eyes, drawing himself up as he inhaled deeply. Each word he spoke next was delicate. Jamie, I like you too. Oh, finally! I got myself a man. He's not a real man, but I somehow managed to get the fake one. A lot. Probably way too much. He ducked his head bashfully and opened an eye, peeking at you through the hair that had fallen over his face like a veil. He'd managed to smile. Thanks for waiting for me. His eyes sparkled just looking at you, his affection transparently clear. He never could hide what he was feeling, and you couldn't be more grateful for that today. I'm gonna hug him. You got up, closing the short distance between you and Cove and wrapping your arms around him. Startled, Cove flinched, just as the groaning chair rolled back across the floor. He met your eyes and giggled nervously. The result of your impulsive action was that Cove was confined to the computer chair. Despite that, he did his best to wind his arm around you in return. It was a little awkward, but even with the benefit of hindsight, you wouldn't have changed a thing. The strength of your feelings had demanded immediate action. It felt so nice to hold each other that way, now that everything was out in the open. Finally, you let one another go. As you straightened up, Cove rose and stood opposite you. Cove then pressed a hand to his creased forehead. Does this mean I'm your boyfriend or something now? Should we tell our parents? I don't know what Dad or Mom would do. There were a lot of concerns in there. You honed in on the simplest. There was no way your moms would let you have a boyfriend, even though that word juxtaposed with Cove's name made your heart race. I want you to be at least something, but I probably can't. It's not fair. Pouting, you huffed and railed against the injustice of it all. Cove lifted his hand from his chest and reached towards you, halting halfway, then slowly, cautiously, hooked his fingers around yours, his palm pressed against the back of your hand. Yeah, I'll hold his hand back. You rotate your hand so that you were palm to palm with Cove, your thumbs crossing one another. We can get it to work. We always figure things out sooner or later. You were temporarily struck speechless, your usual directness punctured by his honest belief in what you had together. Yeah, you're right. We're a pretty good team. Chuckling, Cove smiled at you and tightened his grip on your hand. Jamie, Cove! A sudden call from downstairs caught you both unaware. You'd nearly forgotten the world outside your room. From the guilty look on his face, Cove had done the same. Just had a call. Cove's mom is ready to go. If you're quick, she might keep the mandated motherly smothering to a minimum. You doubted that, but it was nice that Mom and Mrs. Priest had their strange sense of humor in common. Your eyes met Cove's. Wordlessly, you headed downstairs together. Each step on the way there was painfully slow, like he was trying to delay the inevitable. His whole body tensed leaving the house, and Cove froze altogether before you could both cross the street. The door's open. Dad must be taking her stuff out. He swallowed hard. She's really gonna leave. This isn't the last time you'll ever see her. I know, but I got used to having her here. Yeah. It was hard to think of a world where you didn't have both of your moms living at home with you, so you couldn't even imagine how hurt Cove must have been feeling knowing his mom was leaving. You thought you saw his bottom lip quiver just before his head turned away from you. We don't have to head over if you don't want to. No, it'll be worse if I miss her leaving. Okay. At that, some of the conflict wearing on his face eased a bit. Together, you went across the street and inside his house, finding his parents in the living room surrounded by his mom's packed things. Hey, kids. Good timing. I just called the taxi. Hi. And hi, Jamie. So glad I get to see you today. It was fabulous getting to know you this summer. I finally got to put a face to the name I've heard of so many times. She winked, and Cove pouted on cue over the teasing. I'm really happy I got to meet you, too. Hopefully it won't be too long before we see each other again. Nodding, Kira turned her attention back to her boys. She patted Cliff on the arm with a warm smile, and then she enveloped Cove in a crushing hug. Initially, Cove squirmed to break free from her grip, but his mom was unfazed and kept him locked in place. Heartbeats later, he gave in and hugged her back tightly.
I'm so glad.
And I'm so glad this trip was a success. Cliff looked like he was bursting with pride. Well, not a 100% success, but still a passing grade, I think. Thinking back on everything that happened this summer, he started to look sheepish. Lip scratched the side of his head, and an awkward chuckle escaped Cove. There were ways it could have gone smoother. I'm still keeping that in mind for the future.
All right.
Good for you, Cliff. And I'll be trying harder to stay more in the loop. You watched as Cove smiled softly at both his parents, and you felt relieved seeing how much the whole family had come together since you first met them. Despite any underlying troubles, love was still there. After that, it wasn't long before the taxi arrived, rolling up in front of the house and in clear view of the open door. Kira stood up, smiling sadly. Well, that's my ride. Yeah. The matching reply got a chuckle out of Kira as you all filed out of the house. Father and son went with Kira's bags in hand. Once outside, you spotted your family waiting by the street, and to your surprise, Derek was also with them. He stood uncomfortably and he waved as soon as you noticed him.
What's up?
Hey Jamie, hi Cove. When did you get here? My dad dropped me off just a little bit ago. Thought I could visit one more time before school started.
Sorry.
You picked a busy time. Sorry. Derek couldn't even look at Cove. He nervously kept rolling a pebble with the bottom of his shoe.
Sorry.
I wasn't even thinking that your mom would be leaving today. I'm sorry, dude. What? You're not interrupting anything. You're always welcome here. It would have been sad if I didn't get to say goodbye before leaving. Derek came to hang out often, so it was inevitable that the two had met at some point this season. I think so too. It was apparent Derek would have preferred to have gotten there at a more opportune moment. He never liked seeming impolite, but their reassuring words soothed his worries. The tension he was holding in his body lessened, and he looked like he was feeling much more like himself. Bye, Derek. It was fun getting to know you. Bye, ma'am. Is there anything I can do to help? Nah, don't worry yourself over that. We're just about set. In the short amount of time Cliff had gathered and packed the bags into the trunk, Kira took one last look at everyone inside. All right, I don't want to keep the driver waiting. It's time to head out. The little crowd that had formed around started their chorus of farewells and well wishes traveling, but Kira still made no move to get into the taxi. She placed her attention on Cove. I'll call when I get to the airport and when I make it to Nevada. Also, you better call the moment you walk in the door at home, otherwise we'll be wondering all night if you got into trouble on your way there. I can do that. And could you call tomorrow too, so I can tell you how school went? Of course, I want to hear all about it. Kira put a hand on Cove's head and affectionately ruffled his hair one last time. She then let go, only to move on to squeezing his cheeks in her hands instead. Mom, I love you so much, baby. She was chuckling by the time she freed him and rounded things off with a small tap to the tip of his nose. Cove rubbed at his face with a grin. Finally, she walked to the car while waving and took her seat in the taxi. Cliff hooked an arm around Cove's shoulder and kept him close as it began to pull away. For a moment, Cove looked up at his dad, then wrapped an arm across his back.
Bye.
Bye, Mom. Bye, travel safe. Kira rolled down the window and stuck her head out of it. She waved again while blowing kisses at Cove and Cliff. See you again! Before she was out of sight, you decided to... I'm gonna say something. As you added your voice to the others, you watched Kira's smile grow larger. The cab turned down the road and completely disappeared from view. Cove let go of his dad and took a few steps out into the empty street, still looking in the direction his mom went. He smiled quietly, deep in thought. He got the impression Cove was feeling better than he was earlier. He was finally content with the way things were. You jumped a bit when your mom put a hand on your shoulder, pulling you away from your thoughts. She smiled when you looked at her. This was a great vacation, huh? Yeah, it was a good one. Cove walked back over to the group, still genuinely happy. Derek grinned at him welcomingly, and everyone else there smiled at him, even Elizabeth. Aw. Well, Ma clapped her hands together, bringing everyone's attention back to the present. It's almost lunchtime. I think I'll put something special together. Her eyes sparkled with a plan, and Mom smiled. I bet you could use some help with that. That'd be absolutely wonderful. Derek glanced between the two, his eyebrows furrowed. Is there something I could do? Your mom's exchanged a fond expression. Ma shook her head. That's very sweet, Derek, but it's all right. It's not your job. Technically, your dad left you under Cliff's watch. You're meant to be taken care of by him, not doing chores for the neighbors. Mom laughed a little over her own joke. You watched Derek look away, discouraged.
It's okay.
It's okay. I don't mind. He was a little bashful about it. He wondered if Mom's joke had just reminded him that he wasn't initially meant to be invited to lunch. It was getting a little awkward. Mom grinned sympathetically. Her comment was meant to lighten the mood, not bring it back down. Ma tried again to get things moving forward. Why don't you kids go have fun? You can all come back in about an hour. We'll make enough for everyone. Mom nodded in agreement.
Sounds good.
Another stunning idea, Lonnie. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds like a plan then. Don't want to cramp your style. I've got some stuff to work on, so I can be out of here this afternoon. You should come by later, too. No reason you should be the odd man out. Mom seemed amused as Cliff rubbed his neck nervously. He grinned at a wavering but pleased smile.
Thanks very
I
much.
appreciate the invite. He looked over the assembled crowd with knowing glances. I can help too. With as many people as you're feeding, there's going to be a lot of food. Didn't you hear what we told Derek? It wouldn't be fair to make you cook when we're the ones who are inviting you in. Ma raised an eyebrow when Cliff waved it off. I insist Derek would be missing time with his pals. This would be a break for me. I'm quite the chef. Ma and Mom exchanged further glances before Mom shrugged. An airtight argument. If you're sure, we'll be happy to have you, Chef Cliff. Cliff's grin widened and seemed much more hyped than you expected him to be about helping with lunch. Cove shook his head and a fond smile on his face. Then all us grown-up people will be heading inside. I assume the rest of you kiddos are staying out? Maybe not all of them. Ma tilted her head, a silent question for Elizabeth. Your sister thought for a moment.
Alright.
I'll stay with the kids.
That's
That's
fantastic.
great. Both your moms smiled at her, while Derek and Cove didn't seem to appreciate her phrasing. But with the plan decided, all three parents waved ahead for your house. It was just you teenagers now. Elizabeth looked at you and the others, a curious expression on her face. So, what now? You silently wondered if Elizabeth only stayed out with you to avoid getting roped into work. And again, she could just genuinely want to hang out. You couldn't tell with your sister. Cove spoke up after no one else did to answer Elizabeth's question. Want to go down to the shopping street? It's been a while, but I don't think there's a lot of other things we would agree on. Yeah, sure.
Awesome.
Sounds awesome to me. Unlike you guys, I haven't been there 1,001 times. It's new to me. Let's do it. You strolled around across the road as a group, down to the beach and then to the left. It took less than 15 minutes to arrive. One of the conveniences of Sunset Bird. The four of you looked around at the familiar shops, trying to see if anything caught your attention this time. Derek was the most enthusiastic. He checked out every stall with his eyes wide with wonder. Elizabeth and Cove were in good spirits as well. That's so cool! He ran over to a street magician who was currently doing a card trick for a group of enchanted tourists. Derek clapped when the magician showed a middle-aged man his card. Derek turned back to the group with a curious gleam on his face. What does it take to perform here anyway? Do you have to ask somebody or do you just show up and start doing stuff? Why would you even ask? It's a public street. Hey, Mrs. Mayor, can I pull a rabbit out of my hat? Please. Flopsy is well behaved, I promise. Derek chuckled, his eyes searching up and down the scene. Maybe there's a boss for the shopping street? No one does any of this around my neighborhood. It's just regular stores behind walls. It's different if someone wants a real store, but here I'm pretty sure people are just putting on their little shows whenever they want to do whatever. That's so neat. Would we be allowed to do something too? Cove laughed and Derek began almost vibrating with excitement. Elizabeth rolled her eyes. What would we do? Well, I don't know what. Not yet. I mean, I just found out it's a possibility, you know? But there's gotta be something. We know cool stuff. I'm sure if we think about it, we could... If we think about it, we could plan a show that'd really get a crowd pumped. I'll just look at the others. Derek continued to brainstorm out loud about different potential performances while he glanced over at Cove and Elizabeth. I mean, I can bounce a soccer ball on my head. Last time I tried, I got 8 bounces before it fell. I wouldn't bring a ball here. Why not? Cove gestured to everything around, the stalls, the people, all the colorful chaos that made up the shopping street. Would you want to chase a lost ball here? And what if it hit somebody? Even if you're good, someone else could bump into you. That's true. Derek thought about it some more. Then he watched another performer, a woman doing tricks with 2 small dogs. One was fluffy and cream-colored, while the other was a cool gray. The woman held up rings. Both animals jumped through the openings, happy to receive a treat at the end. Derek brightened. Maybe I'll teach crabs how to race. Crabs? It could work. With some amusement, the gang continued to peruse the stalls. Elizabeth found some earrings with a dangling, badly misprinted globe that everyone laughed at. Cove picked out a blob as Iceland, but Derek thought it had to be Greenland. You know, this is a world with what looks like 9 continents. I think you're both wrong. I'll side with Cove. Looks like Iceland and me.
I know.
Right? Suddenly, Cove froze. You stared at him and then tried to see what caught his attention. When you saw a familiar face down the way, it all made sense. Between the crowds, his bright hair stood out like a neon green bowl in a kitchen sink. It was Jeremy. Jeremy slowly drifted his eyes down the street and eyes widened in mutual recognition. He definitely noticed you. Derek frowned and Cove sighed. Neither of them were happy to see him again. I'll smile. He just looked dismissive. Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. Her gaze swept over Jeremy without a hint of a clue. Jeremy simply scoffed to himself and waded deeper into the crowd of people. Derek relaxed and exhaled loudly. I'm glad he's not going to start anything. He peeked over at Elizabeth with a tiny smirk. See? That was the mean kid.
What?
Huh? She still didn't get it. The first summer day hadn't made nearly as much of an impression on her as it did for Derek, but he smiled and waved it off. Just forget about him. I already have. He laughed and Cove smiled lightly. He seemed in a much better mood now that Jeremy was gone. Your eyes wandered over to where Jeremy disappeared. You hadn't forgotten the day you met him either. He was only going to be in town for a vacation with his parents he hated. That glimpse was probably the last time you would ever see him. I'll say that. Well, that should be the last we'll ever see of Bullcut. Bet he's about to get out of here since the summer's almost over. Yeah, guess we won't have to worry about that guy anymore. Derek kicked a little rock in the road. It clattered forward and then rolled under a stall. But I still think it's kind of sad Jeremy turned out to be, well, like he is. I would have been nice to make another friend. Cove shook his head. He was clearly not broken up over what it might have been. Maybe he'll be nicer in the future. Elizabeth rolled her eyes at the strange farewell to the odd boy, not interested in the slightest. She clearly didn't understand his impact, and at this point she didn't want to understand. You couldn't help but wonder, what had happened if you had interacted with Jeremy more? Jeremy was unlike anyone you'd ever met before. It was kind of pitiful. You and the group moved on from the stall and from Jeremy. It didn't take long for everyone to return to the joking. You all enjoyed what little time you had left as Elizabeth mentioned the hour was almost up. The little trip had flown by, and lunch must have been waiting for you now. Derek bounced on the balls of his feet. Come on guys, let's get going so we can eat. I'm starving. I've had enough walking around. Cove stretched one of his arms lazily. Let's go then. You looked at him appraisingly. Carry me! Hey Cove. Yeah. Carry me home. What? Cove turned red, obviously flustered. I want a piggyback ride. And you're the only one big enough to give me one. Cove sighed and shook his head. Elizabeth and Derek became a chorus of laughter. Pretty please. You jokingly pleaded with him, much to the continued amusement of the other two. Alright. Cove stepped over to you. He looked like he couldn't believe what he was doing. Your lips quirked into a large smile. Woo! I knew you'd come through for me. He carefully crouched down in front of you so that you could climb on. It wasn't hard to hop on. He slipped his arms under your legs and did his best to lift you. It was wobbly, but he managed to stand all the way up. Elizabeth watched with a smirk on her face while Derek laughed even harder. It was fair to say that your antics were entertaining. You were glad Cove went with it. Cove carried you home, but he seemed pretty bashful about the situation. He struggled with how much to grip around you or whether or not he should try to reposition things. But along with all that, he also seemed to feel some pride to be carrying you. It was a pleasant walk home, and in no time you had made it back. Derek got to the front door and held it open for everyone as you each moseyed inside. The three parents were still in the kitchen. They looked up and waved. Welcome back, everyone! You made it just in time. I hope you're hungry. When Cove had brought you inside, the parents couldn't help but notice the odd conveyance. Your moms were unsure, and Mr. Holden raised an eyebrow. Did you pull something, Jamie? I'm okay. Oh, Cove, you've gotten so strong. And reliable, too. What a guy. Cove rolled his eyes at the commentary, then started walking to your couch. You bent down and you let yourself plop back onto the couch. Thanks, Cove. I'd give it a 10 out of 10. Cove exhaled loudly and shook out his arms. He just seemed relieved that he made it. So, did everyone have a nice time out? She gestured for people to take a seat at the table. Plates and silverware had already been placed out. You took your normal seat. Elizabeth sat across from you, and Derek took the seat to your left. Cove sat on your right. But he blushed a little and began fidgeting with his silverware. His dad was the first to pick up on his extra awkwardness, but your moms weren't far behind. The parents shared a look at Cove's reaction. It seems that he was struggling with how to act normal around his dad or your parents, or both, after what had happened between the two of you upstairs.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we had a great time. It was fine. I had fun. I really liked it. That's good in my book. Casually, Mr. Holden sat in the empty seat across from Cove. He smiled at you and all the other kids. Mom set down a platter full of water glasses on the table. She looked down at the gathering. It's a good thing we have 8 chairs. I can't remember the last time we've had a group this big over for a meal. Can you pass the drinks down to the other side? Make sure you all get one. Sure. Those close to the cups obliged and started offering waters around. As you passed Cove's drink, your hand touched. Cove froze. You had already let go, not yet realizing that he was too distracted to function in that moment. The glasses fell down to the table, landing with a sharp clatter of glass on the wood. Cove scooted his chair back with a restrained shout. I'm sorry. I'll just get a towel or something. He looked around in a frantic panic, as if an object to soak up the water would magically appear if he turned his head fast enough. His dad bit his lip in worry, rising from his own seat. Cove, what's going on? You've been a little out of it today. Did something happen? Cove tensed, frozen again. He stared at the water on the tabletop as if he wanted to sink into it. I'll speak up. If something did happen, you should wait for Cove to want to talk about it. Trying to make him say things in front of everybody wouldn't be good. Mr. Holden nodded slowly. He still seemed worried, but after another look at Cove, he smiled sympathetically.
Right.
Well said, Jimmy. I'm here when you're ready, son. Of course. Cove breathed a sigh of relief and shot you an apologetic look. You gave him an exaggerated wink when heads turned away from you. As everything got set up, Ma chattered Elizabeth to take her elbows off the table.
No.
And you shouldn't slouch. She pointed to Mr. Holden, who was leaning forward with both arms on the table. Oops. Mr. Holden seemed unsure about all the sudden attention and carefully rearranged his posture to something suitable for a fancy dinner. He smiled sheepishly at Ma. Elizabeth rolled her eyes and Ma gave a level look at her. You shouldn't be impolite to a guest in the house either. Elizabeth groaned long and long-suffering. Ma giggled and Mr. Holden chuckled.
Not bad.
The lot of you could learn a thing or two from Derek. He has the best manners here. Derek blushed, but it was true. His posture was upright and formal. He even held his fork gracefully. His table manners, on top of all of his attempts to age appearance, made him the model of meal attendee behavior. It's nothing. It's true, though. You've been a lovely guest. I've noticed that, too. It's always nice when you stay over, Derek. Derek smiled and sat a little taller in his chair. And do you have anything good to say about our other guest? She looked deliberately at Cove with a teasing smirk. Or is there just nothing to say? Well, Cove is my number one, but he does still clean his hands by wiping them on his pants. Cove frowned at that and absentmindedly brushed his hands on his pant legs. Your mom laughed lightly.
Bear.
Elizabeth, you should know, after all these years, Cove is hardly a guest anymore. Cove smiled awkwardly. Thanks. Manners, who cares? Manners. Don't think I'm not seeing your elbows where they shouldn't be, Jamie. Everyone ate their meal together and contributed to hanging out for the afternoon. After the food, you and the others played a couple games and talked about your plans for the upcoming year. Time passed quickly, and soon it was time to part ways. Mr. Holden talked to your moms, and Cove drifted over to you, knowing that as soon as his dad finished up, he would be leaving. It'd be cool to stay, but we have some stuff to do before everything closes today. Yeah, bye. Could you move? I need the phone. Cove raised an eyebrow, and Elizabeth impatiently gestured behind him. Cove realized he was standing right in front of where the receiver was placed. He sidestepped out of the way and shook his head, clearly thinking Elizabeth was rushing too much. Your sister made a beeline for the phone and started dialing the number of what you figured was one of her friends. Knowing Elizabeth, she was going to be on there for a while. You, Cove, and Derek shuffled closer to the door. It seemed like Mr. Holden was wrapping up his conversation, so everyone started saying their various farewells. See you later, Cove. We gotta do this again sometime. Yeah, see ya. Cove turned to you and smiled slightly. Bye, Jamie. I hug him. You stepped forward and spread your arms wide. Cove only had a moment to react before you had circled him in your arms. Cove hugged you back tightly and his chest rumbled as he laughed. His cheeks were slightly red, especially when he looked over and noticed that Derek had watched the whole thing. Derek smiled amusedly. Seriously, dude, we'll have to hang out later. I'm gonna miss you during school. He offered Cove a high five and the two boys clapped their hands together. Cove and his dad left soon after that. Your parents started cleaning up the house, and Elizabeth was still chatting to her friends on the phone. It was just you and Derek left. He elected to stay outside in front of the house to wait for his dad to pick him up. He decided to keep your guest company, although he was originally Cove's visitor. A light summer breeze blew through your hair, and Derek shifted his weight from foot to foot. Thanks for waiting with me. He kicked at the ground distractedly. Dad's still gonna be a while, so do you want to go for a walk? Sounds great. One last trip for the day. The two of you walked down the street again, just wandering without a destination planned. It was a quiet stroll, too quiet for Derek being the company. You turned to him when you noticed that he wasn't saying a word. That was unusual. Derek always had something he could chat about. You weren't sure if you should ask about it. Somehow you ended up at the old park near the beach. You glanced over to Derek once more, still expecting him to say something any second now. However, nothing came from him. In fact, now you noticed a frown creeping on his face. Derek smiled when he realized you were watching. At least his mouth was turned up. There wasn't anything that really felt happy in the expression. He turned away and the smile fell off his face. His eyes stared intently at the ground and he raised an eyebrow. If you want to talk about something, I'm here. I'm a little sad. It's just with school starting back up again, it's going to be harder to visit. I'm going to have homework and clubs and practices and everything else. It really sucks we go to different schools. His face screwed up and his fists were closed tightly together. This was really concerning him. What if we don't have time? I'll channel some optimism. We'll make time. We can talk over the phone and have plans for weekends. It'll be okay. Derek looked up at the sky. It was orange and purple with little wisps of clouds scattered around. A plane flew high with a jet stream sailing behind it. I totally get how Derek feels. As a kid who was moving schools and wasn't going to be going to the same school as my friends, that was a thought that terrified me. Like, oh my gosh, we are never going to be friends again. But you just have to make time, and if your friends won't make time for you, then they weren't your friends in the first place. You make time for your friends to see them again. Then he turned to the ground again. Derek's face was tilted far enough down that it was harder to read his expression. Hey, Jamie, I actually wanted to talk to you about something if you don't mind. There was a pause and you waited for him to finish his thought.
Sorry.
I was just kind of wondering, do you like guys at all? Like, would you ever want to be with someone who was a boy? Sorry if that's weird to ask. I could be with a guy. Okay, then. He hesitated before finishing his question. Oh no, don't ask me out. So what I mean is, is there any guy that you kind of think of as cool, that you like, around here? Not at school or anything, like that. He ducked his head further. You already knew the answer. You had confronted that very topic this afternoon. I like Cove. Derek chuckled and didn't look at all surprised. Yeah, I kind of thought so. That's cool. I really hope things work out. Thanks for answering my random questions. He shot you a thumbs up. I hope we'll always be friends, no matter what. Even if we don't see each other for a long time, or if we get really busy. I still hope... He cut himself off and met your eyes. There was something serious to him, sincerely worried that you'd fall out of friendship. We're always going to be friends. Derek smiled, mostly to himself. He seemed a little more like the usual. Then for sure, we have to make the most of next year. Then the year after that, and the year after that. He rambled on for a while about things. We'll just make the most of every year. Right. You smiled and felt like your friendship was still strong. He didn't spend much longer at the park after that. Derek didn't want to miss his dad, so you both made your way back to the street. After Derek went home, you decided to settle in for the night, stretching your arms over your head. You noticed that the living room and phone were free. I'll call Lee, why not? You picked up the receiver and quickly punched in the familiar number while going to take a seat on the couch. Soon enough, after explaining the situation to the housekeeper, Lee answered. Hey! Hi, Lee, can you talk? Definitely. We practically have to. My gosh, can you believe it's almost time for school to start? What happened to our summer? School starts first thing tomorrow for me. Ew, and I thought starting next week was bad enough. Enjoy your last week. Oh, I will. I hope you'll survive your first day. Me too. I need a good year. Ditto. And at least summer was nice while it lasted, right? We were busy. Yeah. Fondly, you thought about all the best memories you made this summer. Leah was there for some, but there were still so many you hadn't filled her in on yet. I'll tell her. You began to speak about the road trip. We went on a vacation. Cove's parents ended up inviting my whole family on an RV road trip.
Really?
Whoa, that's awesome. It was a 3-day trip, and we visited the Redwood National Forest. Lucky. Cove did what? He tried to flirt. I was surprised too. I'm so happy for you. You have to keep me updated on what happens next. It was hard to focus on what she was saying. Her face is probably red right now just thinking about what happened. Let's see. The shopping trip. There was this day that Mom and Ma took me and Elizabeth on a big supply shopping trip. What made that so memorable? He chuckled, but you could hear the curiosity in her voice. I stayed out late, hanging out with Cove. Ooh, what were you two up to? It wasn't hard to imagine the teasing look Lee must have on her face. Her imagination was already running far too wild. Nothing crazy happened. Boo. We just got caught up with stuff. The day was over before we knew it. Those are always good days. Yeah. That's enough. What was your big highlight for the summer, Lee? Talking to you is always the best part of my summer. Even though it was a phone call, you just knew that Lee was winking at you. Come on, tell me. What, you don't believe me? Lee. Alright, okay, so a high point for me was when I took that trip with my parents to Europe. That was amazing. You and Lee continued to go over your adventures until you both were yawning to each other over the phone. Before you go, there's one other thing. I told Cove I have a crush on him today. There was a pause of silence. Knowing your cousin, you decided to pull your ear away from the phone. As expected, a screech loud enough for you to still make out clearly from the distance crackled through the speaker. When you felt it was safe, you put the phone back against your head. Lee was still gushing to herself, though a little less loudly. Why didn't you say so sooner? He had to have liked you back, right? You two are the most perfect pair ever. Tell me, please. You used the precious little time you had left to try filling her in as best you were capable of in that moment. But soon as the approach of curfew became too much for you to ignore, sorry, despite how excited the both of you were. At that, you decided it was time to say goodbye for now. You did have school to wake up for in the morning. Bye, Lee. Night, Jamie. Talk to you later. You left the phone on the side table for now. Looking at the clock on the wall, you saw there were only about 10 minutes until your moms would be insisting you had to go to bed and could be rested enough for school. You stretched your legs out on the couch and sighed in defeat, watching the minute hand change 1 minute closer to bedtime. You rearranged yourself, feeling restless, and looking out the window. Startled initially, you spotted a figure out in the hills. It was Cove! With the surprise faded, you realized it really wasn't that much of a shock at all. It was exactly something Cove would do. Of course I'm gonna go meet him. Strolling casually, you went over to the front door. When you arrived, you noticed how many fireflies were out that night. They drifted along lazily, barely minding your presence as you waded through to reach the top of the hill. Cove turned towards you as you approached, and you noticed right away that Cove looked happy to see you. Well, I should think so. Hey, you had a bounce in your step. You weren't sure how long you'd get before your moms roped you back inside for bed. Hey, you're starting strong. Out late on the very first school night of the year. Chuckling, Cove crossed his arms. Seriously, what are you doing here? Nothing really. He shrugged, seeming unhappy with his own answer. You stared at him, waiting for him to continue. Well, I guess I was kind of feeling weird about stuff, so I'm getting some fresh air before bed. I know how you feel. It's hard to stay still. Tomorrow is going to be the start of a new year. At the mention of school, a small noise escaped him. Cove let himself fall back onto his butt and then all the way down, so he was laying on his back. He looked up at the sky. Of course. You lowered yourself to lay back on the hill. He had been lost in thought, or was possibly waiting for you to situate yourself, but he started speaking unprompted again. Thanks for telling me about my dad, and the money he offered you to be my friend. This was probably the last thing you were expecting out of him. Cove seemed to pick up on that and stretched his arms out wide in front of him. This is where we met, remember? It happened that day. You could recall the sad little boy with a pink cast who you found in this very spot. It seemed like a lifetime ago. I kind of had a strange feeling looking at you. Not in a bad way. Just thinking about you then and really seeing you now. It's something. He turned his face away from you. You got the impression he was trying to hide a blush. It was almost unbelievable how much of an impact he made on your life just by moving next door. You couldn't even imagine what your days might have looked like in a world where you hadn't met him. Cove glanced back at you, waiting for a response. You had no idea what to say. Then, still without a word from you, Cove shook his head strongly. What? It's you. Huh? He snickered before answering. He looked thoroughly amused with your reaction. That's what you do all the time, so I'm being you. So do you, Cove. Really? Yes, always. Cove couldn't help but grin at that. Honestly, there weren't many people you could think of who could tease you about something like that. Returning a smile, you realized there was no denying that you two have been around each other for a long time. Cove broke the quiet before it could fully settle.
See you tomorrow.
Hey, I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, see you then. With a final wave, Cove headed for home, but you stayed there a few minutes longer. Your mind kept going back to his simple statement, see you tomorrow. No matter how much was changing around you, there were some things in your life that always seemed to remain true. The hills felt warm to you that night. Before you knew it, you were getting comfortable under the covers in your room. Your mind couldn't help but still be buzzing with thoughts about the future. It was hard not to think about Cove. There hadn't been enough time to really figure it all out after what had happened between you. You felt excited, maybe nervous. Every bit of your gut felt like it was being turned into a pretzel. A new chapter of your life was about to begin, and you were worried what new changes were waiting for you. Slowly, your eyes grew heavy as you drifted off to sleep, your mind spinning with wishful thoughts. No matter what happened next, you could only hope that you would make the most of it. You were ensnared in a dream when a noise from the outside world jostled you. Boom, what's there? The light clatter continued. Now that you were more alert, you could distinguish it as a tapping sound. Quiet, slow, but persistent. Each beat was like being poked. You couldn't ignore it. You lifted your head from the pillow and looked for the source. Not much work was needed to puzzle it out. It was from the window. With that, you knew exactly what it was. From the color of the light flittering into your room, it was too early for anyone to be awake, including the sun. It had barely hauled itself over the horizon. But that didn't stop some people, it seemed. You sat up in a bed and opened the window wide. Cool air, not yet warmed by the day, tickled your face as it pushed into your room. And just as you'd expected, there was your neighbor crouching on your windowsill. He was fully dressed, though not for school. He was wearing a wetsuit and a shy smile. Hi, Jamie. You stared back, blinking. So technically, we won't be back to school for a few more hours. His voice was delicate yet deliberate, each word a careful explanation. Classes haven't actually started yet, so do you want to hit the beach with me one more time this summer? Always. His smile widened affectionately. You rush to get changed into something suitable, while Cove climbed back down to ground level. Your limbs, still half asleep, struggled somewhat as you attempted to coordinate them into a swimsuit, but you got there in the end. Soon you were tiptoeing out of your front door, clutching a towel. Cove was already there to greet you. Your eyes met. Cove started to your destination and back to you. You checked the door was closed, gave him a thumbs up, and the two of you leapt into action. Wordlessly, you began to run down the familiar path ahead, Cove beside you. The thrill of your illicit outing made you want to laugh. Now that you dared, if anyone in your family looked out and saw you, then your summer would be back to being over. One glance at Cove told you that he was exactly the same, holding back snickers for fear of being heard and caught. The towel streamed out from under your arm like a cape. You were running so fast downhill that simply keeping your balance and not tumbling down was a real threat. It just wasn't enough of one to make you slow your pace. For every step you took, the beach was a little closer and the day a little brighter. What lay ahead for you would arrive, and you were happy to meet it. Oh, that was wonderful! In between. Are there more? How far does this go? Till we die? Okay, so now we're not in middle school anymore. And in high school, my hair actually got really long. It wasn't super long, but we'll just... we'll just look through them all. Okay, well, let's just pick... That's the kind of hair bangs I had. And then we'll just do... They kind of look like that, to be honest. Okay. Still don't have any of that. We'll give myself some earrings. Yeah. Hand size slender. Forgot about that. Braces. I did not have braces, actually. Ring? I'll have a pattern ring. Headscarf, no. Nail length. My nails are pretty long. They're medium, but okay. My nails be pink. Don't have a nose ring. That's everything. Done. Definitely still direct. We can pick love. I'm picking love. I'm picking love. Bing. Yes. Okay, Cove customization. I really don't want to pick his personality. I know last time I did it on accident. I just want to change his appearance. Look at it. Oh, ponytail. Oh, there. Oh, he looks good in all of them. That's my favorite though. I still want him to wear glasses. He's a glasses guy. I can't see his earrings. Hold on, let me change it so I can see his earrings. Yeah, earrings. Oh, I kind of like the short hair. No, I'm kind of liking the short. OMG. He doesn't like layers. He said he doesn't like layers. Okay, the pants are lame. We'll give him those. Where's this pink bracelet? Fine, that one's close enough. Ooh. That one. Definitely the necklace. Okay. No glasses. No earrings when you sleep. Ooh, I don't like those PJs. We'll go with purple. That's fine. Swimsuit. Pink. We don't wear that. Formal. Ooh. I guess that. And we'll put his glasses back on. And his earrings. Oh my gosh. Done. Since you're romantically interested in Cove and are old enough to begin physically affectionate more seriously, you can choose what initiate level he has through step 3. Make sure the player experiences what they want is important in our life, but always putting your choice first can potentially make a relationship feel one-sided. So we've added some flexibility in how it works out. Low initiative means that Cove will occasionally ask to touch the MC, and in those situations there will always be an opportunity to say yes or no. Oh, that's so thoughtful. For example, he won't simply lean over and kiss the MC as a greeting or in an emotional moment. Every piece of physical interaction will either be initiated or approved by the player before it happens. That's so cool. I love that. Middle initiative means there will be those certain times when Cove requests to touch the MC, many chances to initiate affection on your own, and also Cove will be pretty regularly give affection automatically. One example would be giving the MC a kiss because he's happy or emotional. I like that one. High initiative includes everything middle does, but also means the player agency will be reduced to a degree in favor of having Cove give physical affection even more frequently. This level is only recommended if you're very comfortable with physical affection and would prefer to simply see it happen rather than always holding the reins on it. However, this level is most relevant if Kova ends up as your official boyfriend at some point. Situations where high-level initiative makes a difference tend to come up in scenes that are exclusive to being in a relationship. The parts that are also included in the middle initiative will be seen whether you're dating or not. Once you pick your level, it can't be changed later. Okay. Middle initiative. I think that's the best choice. And this is where we're gonna end it. This has been super long, but I hope you enjoyed anyways, and I'll see you next time when we become a high schooler, which is cool. Hope you have a good day, good week, good year, good life. Bye!